My dad's going first. Okay. What?
The Pursuit of Mindful Living, episode number 14. Hold on. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Pursuit of Mindful Living. My name is David Doucette, and I have my boys here, so yeah, you guys. Okay, I'm gonna cut the music out and get right to it. All right, Jake, you want to say hi?
Remy goes first.
Remy?
Hi.
Good job. And the camera's up here, so you can say hi, and then where the green light is, and you can say hi.
Hi.
Careful. Careful. Okay, gotta talk, guys. Don't pull that, please.
I'm not sure what to say.
You're not sure what to say. So here we are. It's a Saturday. My name is David Doucette, and I'm joined by my two little beautiful boys, Jake over here, and what's your name?
Remy.
Remy. And we're in the office this morning, Saturday morning. I just picked them up, but I wanted to actually record this brief intro. Hold on, bud. And did you figure out anything you want to say yet? What do you want to say?
I don't know.
Okay. What do you want to say, Rem? You want to sing a song?
No.
How about singing the pumpkin song?
5 little pumpkins sitting on a gate. The first one said, "Oh my, it's getting late." The second one said, "Order witches up in the air." The third one said, "I really don't care." The fourth one said, "Let's run, let's run." The fifth one said, "It's only Halloween fun." So, wish went the wind, then out went the lights. 5 little pumpkins rolled out of sight.
Good job, buddy. That was awesome.
I'm still not saying it.
That's okay. All right. Thank you, Remy, for that. Remy is 3, by the way. So what I wanted to do today is I recorded a great interview this week with Joshua Metcalf, buddy, of traintobeclutch.com for my CSE prep business, the business where I teach architectural candidates how to pass the California supplemental exam. And we talked a lot about positive mindset and heart's beliefs, to use Joshua's words, which I thought were great. So I'm actually releasing this or that recording with this week's episode of The Pursuit of Mindful Living. So I'm going to bring it to you now. I'm going to cut out about probably the first 5 minutes where we talk about just some CSE related stuff.
Hello, my name you know.
What's that? Yeah, so it's a long interview. It's great. Yeah, hold on. And hopefully you're going to enjoy it because it's really great and it's very applicable to us in whether we're in businesses or in individual lives. So here it is. And guys, do you want to say bye?
Bye. Bye.
Bye. All right. And here is the interview. Oh, that was so great, guys. Thank you.
I'll talk some more.
You want to talk some more? You want to sing another song? Not so close, not so close.
1 little, 2 little, 3 little children, 4 little, 5 little, 6 little children, 7 little, 8, 6 little, 7 little, 8 little children, 10 little children having fun. They jumped in the boat, and the boat tipped over. They jumped in the boat tipped over. 10 little children got wet. They fish is shrink on mommy. The fish is shrink on mommy. Then the little children got. Then Mama wiped her faces and she put them to bed. Mama wiped her faces and she put them to bed. Then the little children got his.
Good job, Remy. Oh, that is so great, buddy. Do you want to say bye to everybody?
Bye.
All right. Thanks, bud.
Let's put it back up.
Okay, I'll take care of it. All right, and then Joshua, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
And I met Joshua only recently through Facebook, actually, and we exchanged some emails, and he was talking about what he did or what you do, and I thought it would be really great to have you come on to this podcast because I think the kind of stuff that you teach people is the kind of stuff that can really help a lot of these candidates with really just being overwhelmed in this exam. And so your company is called traintobeclutch.com, or Train to Be Clutch.
Yep.
And tell me a little bit about what you do.
Well, Train to Be Clutch actually spawned out of Dream Sports Academy, which is the nonprofit that I started. We work with talented at-risk athletes down in one of the toughest housing projects in the country, in South Central of the Watts housing projects. And so I originally just started going out and doing speaking engagements to different athletic teams and really anyone that would have me. But rather than just talk about what, Dream Sports Academy is and what we do, I figured that I would bring value to the table, and so I would actually just go out and teach. And so I started teaching people what at first I thought were just sports psychology tips that I'd learned at Duke. I got to work with one of the best sports psychologists in the country. His name is Greg Dale, and I was working on my master's there and playing out my last year of eligibility. And I went from being the last pick on the team whenever they would pick teams during pickup games to finishing second in points to the best player in the country in a 2-month period after applying what he taught. And I realized that I had been an emotional and, kind of a basket case, and my heart's beliefs weren't really good when it came to soccer. And so I started teaching these principles to athletes. Well, then I'd have a conversation with an actress, and she got phenomenal results after, applying what I teach. And then I started teaching business people, and it just kind of has spawned from there. And so that's basically what I do, is I teach people how to train mentally and how that raises your heart's beliefs, because I believe that your heart's beliefs are way more important than cognitive knowledge, which is what we cram ourselves full of. But until we take head knowledge and turn it into heart knowledge, we kind of lack in our performance.
And that's actually a really great thing. And I think people listening to this already can probably relate to a lot of what you're saying. But I heard this not too long ago. I can't remember where I heard it, but it was kind of like knowledge is just what you have. Knowledge is information. It's the wisdom that allows you to take that knowledge and then, take it to the next level, or give you the confidence to take that to the next level. So it's sort of like knowledge is just knowledge. You now have to have the wisdom to really make use of that knowledge. Yeah.
If you don't, knowledge can actually be disempowering at certain times. If you were to have bought a house in 2007, which conventional knowledge would say is a wise investment, then you're most likely left holding the bag, 2008, 2009. Even though it's typically a good, solid investment to make, if you applied that knowledge at the wrong time, then it was actually, disempowering for you. So you gotta figure out how to apply knowledge at the right time in order to get the most benefit out of it.
Which is exactly, and it's so funny because you don't really know too much about CSE Prep. I'm going to tell you more about it and about this exam that the candidates take. But that is one of, I think what you just said is one of the core principles, because there's so much information that candidates are required to know, and they can get into the minutia and just get lose focus because they're getting into the minutia details of just stuff which they don't need to. So it is, what knowledge do I need and how do I apply that? And so I'm really excited for what we're going to talk about. So let me give you basically a general overview of this exam so you can get a better idea of what the candidates are going through and who exactly they are. So it's the California Supplemental Exam. It is administered by the California Architects Board. And every candidate, or basically to get licensed in California, you take a series of computer-based exams, and they are standardized across the country. But you still have to apply to an individual state. Even though it's a standardized test across the country, your paperwork has to be at some state. So I originally got registered or licensed in New York. And usually you can transfer your license. If you're licensed in New York, you can just, file some paperwork and transfer it to another state. California, however, because California is California, and they, the economy and the landscape and all of that, they have this special exam that says to all of those architects, if you want to practice architecture in the state of California, you need to take this special exam that we put together. So that's the supplemental exam aspect of it. So we're really focusing on architects who want to get licensed in the state of California, because
Gotcha.
if even if they're licensed in the state of New York, as far as the state of California is concerned, they're not licensed, in California.
Right.
So so there's this exam. It used to be oral, and they changed it to a computer-based multiple choice format at the beginning of this year. So the overview of the exam is there's 125 multiple choice questions, and they break it down into two categories. The first category is the project scenario section, where they will give you a library or California Highway Patrol station or something like that, and then they ask you 35 questions based on that project scenario. And then the second section is the general section, and that's just more generalized knowledge, and it's about a 3.5-hour exam. And what the California Architects Board provides you for materials is really just what they call a test plan. And in that test plan, they give you 55 knowledge statements that you have to know about. They don't give you the information about those knowledge statements. They just give you the knowledge statements, like knowledge of topography and how that applies to design and construction or something like that. They don't give you any of the other stuff. So and the categories that candidates need to know about are like context and pre-design. So how do they begin designing a project? Regulatory, which is a big one. So really knowing the agencies that are involved, whether it's the California Coastal Commission or the State Water Resources Control Board or the local planning department. So really having a knowledge of that. Also knowledge of management and design. So really what we do as architects, the services we provide to a client. And then finally, during construction, how do we work during construction? So it's geared towards really developing a general overview of the architectural profession. So tends to be what I've noticed is, for example, firm owners by nature tend to do a little better on the exam because they have a little bit, they have more well-rounded knowledge.
Right.
And that helps for this kind of exam because it's sort of a well-rounded, knowledge-based exam. And the demographics that I've been seeing, I've been teaching this for 3 years, is really late 20s to 60s. I would say with a majority in their 30s and 40s. Okay. And they can work full or part-time, and they have the family struggles and all of that. And the thing is, it's a difficult exam. I recommend at least 2 months of preparation for this. And, families and babies and work and all that stuff. And then I'll share just some of the struggles, and then we can kind of talk more about what your thoughts. I think some of the general struggles I have seen is number one, they're overwhelmed by the material. There's so much material, they get overwhelmed and where to start. And then that's the second one is, where do I start? And then the third is, how should I study, or what's the best way to study? And then finally, anxiety. A lot of the candidates are anxious about that, and they are anxious to the point of they're afraid of failing because they think if they fail, the world's going to fall apart. And I've been telling them lately it's not going to happen. Whether you pass this thing or you fail it, your family's still going to love you. The life goes on. And then the lack of confidence. And so that's kind of, which is probably, I would imagine you can relate to a lot of the people you teach. It's the same kind of, I guess, principles and fears and concerns, right?
It always are. They're almost the exact same across the board. So even though I have zero understanding and knowledge of anything that has to do with architecture, I completely relate to and work with people all the time in many different fields that have the exact same feelings and descriptions of everything that you've just said that your clients deal with on a daily basis.
It's crazy, and I think I've noticed too. I think a lot of candidates, when they start to get overwhelmed, they get scared and they operate from a place of fear. And as we know, that's a difficult place to operate from. And I would teach them too. It's like confidence is really what you need to be confident on exam day, and how you get that confidence, that's going to depend on the individual candidate, but you have to study. And there is, especially for this exam, there's no little blue pill you can take where all of a sudden you just know the information, you know?
Right.
So that's kind of the background. Now, let me ask you this. How would you, or how do you recommend, you know, someone's ready to start this exam, they don't know where to begin. Like what's the first thing that you might recommend they do?
Hire you.
Thank you. And attend my seminar on January 28th.
No, but seriously, I mean, the first thing that I would recommend in an area where I don't have a lot of knowledge is you want to get the best strategies. So you want to find people who know about this test, who have taken this test, who've successfully taken this test, and you want to learn their strategies. Then the second thing that I think is the most important would be to start, you know, working on your heart's beliefs. And so to kind of explain that and flesh that out a little bit, SMU soccer is a perennial top 10 program. They were out here playing UCLA, I think 2 months ago, and I had a brief conversation with them before they played that game. And I asked them, I said, how big of a role was the mental side of soccer? And they all agreed that it was 70 or 80% mental. And then my follow-up question was, okay, great. So how much time do you spend training mentally? And they were like, well, and one of them was like, how do you train mentally? And I mean, this is a perennial top 10 program, a program, you know, that they're recruiting some of the best athletes in the country that come from some of the best programs, yet they're not being taught how to train mentally. It's just something that gets completely overlooked. And so what I've found is that whenever we do start spending time, and it doesn't have to be extra time, it can be time whenever you're in the car, it can be time whenever you're in the shower, you know, places where you can start sowing different things into your heart, and what you sow into your heart is going to come back. So it's kind of like an input determines the output. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether or not it's a car. You know, if you put water into the gas tank, your car is not going to work very effectively. If you put, you know, horrible things inside of your body, then your body's not going to perform very effectively. And the same thing goes with our hearts. You know, how much negativity are we putting in? How much disbelief are we putting into our heart? How much anxiety are we putting in there versus how much positivity, how much empowering beliefs, and, you know, really what types of things are we consistently putting in the gas tank of our heart?
That's actually a great takeaway. What did you call that again? Your heart's what?
Heart's beliefs.
Your heart's beliefs. That's a really good one. I like that analogy, and I think that's very applicable to the candidates that are listening to this now. And because I've been teaching them too, it's similar, like preparing for this exam. It's similar to going to the gym, where, you know, you're going to the gym, you're eating healthy, and you don't see the results right away. Mm-hmm. It takes time, you know. Yeah. And the thing I've been sharing with people lately is I've been in a really cool gym routine the last, you know, 6 or 7 weeks, and now I'm working on a 2-pack. Working on a 6-pack, but it's like I have a 2-pack, you know. Yeah. And that didn't happen overnight, you know. Right. So you kind of, but I like the idea of that you mentioned about working on the mental training, because you need it. Yeah. And so how do we do that, or how do we, I guess, what's the best way to start developing our mental strength?
The first thing that I always start with are affirmations. And a lot of people, you know, they've heard negative things about positive self-talk and things like that, and they kind of disown it. But what's interesting is that there's been groundbreaking scientific studies done at the University of North Carolina by Barbara Fredrickson, and she just put them out in a book called Positivity. And what they've actually found is that your positivity ratio, if it isn't above a certain point, then you're actually languishing in life. And if it's below a certain point, you're actually clinically depressed. And if it's above a certain ratio, then you're actually flourishing. And the crazy part about it is that it operates on a nonlinear equation. So you're not going to see the results until you hit a certain ratio. And so 80% of people are beneath that ratio. And so in your personal life, it's 3-to-1. In your business life, it's 3-to-1. And in marriages, it's actually 5-to-1. But it's just insane, because it literally operates off this spiral. And once you get above it, then the positivity works and it spirals you upwards. If you're beneath it, it tends to work in the opposite direction. So what I like to do with clients is I like them to figure out, what are their end goals? What is their vision? So, with this architectural test, if you want to be the best architect in the world or the best architect in California, then what you would want to do is you'd want to write out your vision. And then from that, we would create affirmations based off of, I am statements that are as if you've already achieved those goals. Because what you focus on, you're going to become. And sadly, most of us focus on the negative and what if I fail? What if I fail? Well, if those are the thoughts that are going through your head, if that's what you choose to focus on, then that's going to get bigger and you're going to almost guarantee that you fail. So we create these I am statements, and from there, then you start sewing those into your heart every single day. I try and get my clients to spend at least 10 minutes with their affirmations every day. The most important time to do affirmations are right after you wake up and right before you go to bed, because your brain's actually what's called the alpha state, and it's the easiest time for you to rewrite things on your heart. Basically, what that means is that your cognitive or conscious brain isn't as engaged at that point, and so the statements that you make actually slip past it. Your guard isn't up as much, and so you're able to write on your subconscious. When I say your heart, I also mean your subconscious. So it's the easiest time to actually rewrite things on your heart.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. So it's kind of like, because if we're filling our brain with all this information, it's not getting to our subconscious, it's not getting to our heart.
Right.
So like you were just saying, if you do that in the morning or in the evening, your brain is sort of asleep, so it can slip by.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is like that's the stuff that really needs to get into your subconscious, because that's going to give you the confidence and whatever else you need. That's interesting. Because
the crazy part is that if we don't believe that we are going to pass this test, that we're going to be a great architect, then your subconscious is actually going to sabotage you and make you screw up and it's going to inhibit you in every single way. Your study sessions are going to be distracted. You're not going to be focused there. You're just going to have a smorgasbord of things that will come into your life that you'll think, and they'll be real excuses, but that you'll probably have concocted somewhere in your subconscious to sabotage yourself.
Yeah. And I've seen that with candidates, and I've seen that with candidates that have even taken my seminar and haven't passed. I could tell just from sort of their emails and their email responses and the way their emails go.
Yeah.
So it's very it's amazingly interesting, and I think what's amazing to it, and I know everyone who's listening to this can immediately identify with everything you're saying. As you said before, you don't know a lot about the architectural exam, but it's the same stuff. It's like no matter what business, we're all human.
Yeah. So another really cool thing that you're talking about with the emails, and that you could almost tell. So the father of positive psychology is a person by the name of Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania. He kind of figured this out a long time ago, back in the 70s, and nobody really was listening to him then.
Right.
But what they started doing is they would look at in sports teams. They would go in and catalog the way that they talked in their press conferences after games. And they were actually able to determine how well they were going to do in the future based off of the amount of optimism versus pessimism that was in their statements. And they did it with presidential elections. They've done it in many different areas. They've gone back and backdated and backtraced things to figure out whether this would hold true. And they've also predicted future events based off of it as well. And so it's really interesting that positivity, optimism, they actually they're now being linked scientifically to results.
That's very interesting, and it's actually no surprise, I think, probably when we just stop to think about it. And one of my other shows, The Pursuit of Mindful Living, which is actually how we connected, I did a show a while ago just talking about, attitude is everything. And it's kind of like if there's one thing that we could give our kids, it's almost just like a positive attitude. Because with a positive attitude, you can do anything. You don't have to be the smartest or the brightest or whatever. But if you got that positive attitude, it's incredible.
It really is incredible what you're able to accomplish. And just being positive is probably not enough, but it definitely, when we put ourselves into a more positive state of mind, we're more apt to respond in a way that's constructive versus destructive. We so oftentimes we can snap at somebody or do something, and if we were to look back, most of the times when we react poorly are when we're in a poor state of mind.
Right.
And so there are simple things, simple techniques, and different things that we can just shift our focus. We can shift our physiology. We can shift the language that we're using. Just little simple things that we can do that actually then improve our state. And then from that improved state, we're actually able to perform at a much higher level.
Yeah, and I think too with the positive attitude, like you're saying, it's our foundation, because now we're open to new things and new ways of thinking. And if we don't have that positive attitude, we're already, well, that ain't going to work, or that's not going to work, or and I would imagine some people probably listening to this episode now are like, oh, positive affirmations, I'm not going to do that. That's not going to work, and they're already in that state of mind. It's like, but now let's take somebody like that who is just sort of in that state of mind. Like they just, maybe they've taken this exam a couple of times. They've been in the field for 20 years. They just can't pass this exam, and they feel defeated. And how do you pick somebody like that back up?
Well, if we're dealing with a case that's that extreme, I would say that they'd probably be benefited greatly by just contacting me and sitting down with me, and I can kind of literally go through and find out what their specific causes are. Right. Because so many times, what I would consider generic responses and generic training tools that I offer, if they're applied, they work. And that's, they don't come back null and void. So just like I would tell somebody, that wanted to take this test, that they need to come to you for the strategies. If that isn't working for them, then obviously there are some deeper heart issues that we need to get into and work through.
Yeah, that's exactly it, because at that point, it's not about this exam anymore. It's bigger than that.
Exactly. There are, just to, I think people relate sometimes better to external stories. To get out of the housing projects, I think that most people would agree there are some pretty simple solutions for kids. Now, for adults, it's different. But if you're a kid and you read everything that you can get your hands on for 15 years, I think that you're going to dance out of the projects. You're going to have so much knowledge and understanding and wisdom from reading biographies, reading autobiographies, reading about everything. I mean, you could learn how to create websites. There are so many things that you could do, and there's so much knowledge that they have access to that are simple strategies to get them out of the housing projects. The problem is they don't believe that they can ever get out of there. And my friends and I who've been going down there with my organization for about 2 years, we've actually just started a campaign called Raise the Ratio, because we believe that the ratio of imperial courts is somewhere around -15 to 1. And so because it's so negative, they can't see simple solutions. Right. And that's what people, as you were referring to earlier, that's what they get caught up in so often, is they're so just engrossed in negativity that it's like, this doesn't work. Positivity isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Well, okay, then nothing's going to work for you, because until you raise your heart's beliefs, nothing's going to change.
That's a good point. I don't get this email often. In fact, I think I might have gotten it once or twice, but sort of as an introductory email from a candidate, they'll be like, I just bought your study materials. I hope they work. And like, that's it in the email, and it's kind of like, it's like, what do you say? I mean, it's like, you gotta be in that frame of mind. I think that we're talking about. One book that I'm reading now, which I think is just incredible, is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Mm-hmm. Have you read this?
Everybody's always telling me to read it, and I've read so many other books that are along the same line, so I understand the concept and premise, and I haven't read it, but I know
you have to read it just to say you read it, because I've heard about it for years, right?
Right.
And it's only like $2 on the Kindle, you know, if you download it for your
No,
Kindle.
I own it. That's
you do. Oh, that's see, there you go. But I finally started reading it, and you know, it was written in 1936, and Napoleon Hill took 25 years to write this book, and he talked to, you know, the Henry Fords and the J.P. Morgans at the time, and you know, how did these people do it? You know, Henry Ford didn't graduate high school, and one of the common traits was positive thinking and having faith. And he also talks about, you know, we're in a difficult time. We're coming out of the Depression, and everybody's trying to reinvent themselves or trying to, you know, find new ways to do things. It's like so applicable to right now. It's incredible.
No, I completely agree.
And it is. And he's got a chapter dedicated to the power of positive thinking. And I mean, and he said that's what a lot of these entrepreneurs that he interviewed, that's what they had. It first started with an idea, and then kind of the positive thinking, and then the faith. I mean, it was really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, personally, I am a, person of faith, and, I believe in Jesus, but I know that a lot of people get very hesitant when you even use that word, semantically being faith. But what Martin Seligman has come up with is that optimism actually operates on a few different spectrums, and so that it can be permanent, it can be pervasive, or personal. And so whenever, we probably don't have time to get into it completely here, but that there's lots of different forms of optimism, and whenever, more so I think what you're contributing to with the faith word is that, it's like you have to have this permanent optimistic outlook that things are going to get better at some point, and that if you keep doing good work, eventually you're going to succeed. And with Henry Ford, I mean, he's the one who said, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right.
That's exactly it. And it is. It's interesting. In Napoleon Hill's book, he had this whole chapter dedicated to faith. I don't think he really mentions religion or Jesus at all. And it's just about the faith that you just talked about. And that's probably more where I operate from, is just the faith that things are going to work out, and that's a powerful mindset.
Yeah, one interesting thing about faith, because it gets spoken about so much in religious circles, is that from what I've been told, actually in the Hebrew, faith typically is translated belief, and so that those beliefs are so important. And to give another scientific example, they actually did a study a few years back at Harvard on the placebo effect, and everybody knows about the placebo effect, but they actually took it one step further. And they told people that they were going to give them a stimulant, and then they actually gave them a barbiturate, and then the exact opposite of that. And people, their beliefs actually overrode the chemical properties of drugs, and they behaved the way that they thought that they were supposed to behave based off of their belief. And so, this Harvard professor was basically our beliefs are more powerful than the chemical properties of drugs.
That's interesting. That reminds me of a story I read in a book way back when. I think it was at a Pink Floyd concert back in like the late 60s. They gave the audience basically sugar cubes, and this is when LSD was the big drug.
Yeah.
And they gave everybody sugar cubes, and everyone was thinking it was LSD. Well, everybody tripped, and all they did was have sugar cubes,
Yep.
But they thought that they
Exactly.
had LSD. It's interesting.
It's insane how that's possible, but that's how powerful our beliefs are. And that's why, some people think that I go overboard with it, but I'm like, everything that we do has to be directed at our heart's beliefs, because experiences don't change us if our heart's beliefs aren't malleable. We've all seen a girl who's drop dead gorgeous, who has had thousands of people tell her that she's beautiful. But if she doesn't believe that she's beautiful, those experiences don't matter.
Yeah.
She still thinks, I'm not beautiful. You could even look at people, who have eating disorders, and they look in the mirror and they see themselves as bigger than they are, even though, it's all in their head, but their beliefs in their heart are, they're kind of twisted up, and it affects them in detrimental ways. And we can all see it in people like that, but we're like, oh, well, in my own life, it doesn't apply the same way. But we all have beliefs that are disempowering us, and it's so important that we're doing things to raise them on a daily basis.
So let's say we have somebody who their mindset is in the right place. They have their positive beliefs. So in thinking, if we're going to think of a game plan for them for a second, is so number one, we have the positive affirmations. Mm-hmm. And would that include sort of just writing them down? And I've heard, posting them in, on your bathroom mirror, the first place you go in the morning, and posting them on the refrigerator. Is that the kind of thing too that you do?
I don't talk to people about posting it.
Okay.
And I don't really care about the process. I care about the outcome. I want people to focus on what it for them is going to be the best way for them to remember and just consistently start sowing these affirmations into their life. So with some clients, what we've actually started doing is recording them to music and having them listen to them. And, it's easy to do in GarageBand. I'm not a PC person, so I don't know how difficult it would be on a PC. But I know that it's very easy to do in GarageBand. And what I found is that just like jingles get stuck in people's heads, that whenever they listen to their affirmations, one, it's in their voice. But then two, it's also doing that same thing that we talked about earlier by just skipping the conscious brain and going more directly into the subconscious, so rewriting things quicker and easier and more efficiently on their hearts as well. So that's one way that we found. But another way is in the mirror. I do think that in the mirror, saying things with belief and looking at yourself and hearing yourself saying it and seeing your physiology, that is important as well, that it's one of the more powerful ways to do it. But, there are also times where, as we live in LA and we deal with traffic all the time, whenever I'm in the car in traffic, I try and do my affirmations, because then it's no extra time that I'm spending. It's just, and rather than getting frustrated and being in a bad mood and putting myself into a negative state, I try and take advantage of that time in the car and sow those affirmations into my heart there as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just need to stop you with the mirror thing, because I was thinking of my two boys who are 5 and 3, who I can't get them away from the mirror. It's like, Jake, go brush your teeth. Goes into the bathroom, doesn't even turn the water on, doesn't even touch his toothbrush. He's in there for 5 minutes. I don't know what he's doing in front of the mirror, like looking at himself, basically. And I'm like, brush it, so finally he does. And then Remy will come and do the same thing. They love being sort of in front of the mirror and exploring, and, but I think that's good.
Have you seen that video of the 3-year-old who does her affirmations? It's got like 8 million views on Facebook.
No.
If you haven't seen it, I'll send you the link to it.
Send me the link. Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes.
It's incredible. And she literally, if we could as adults do that, it would benefit us in a way that it's so beneficial we can't even probably wrap our minds around it. But she just gets up and, I am awesome, and I love my mom, I love my dad, I love this, I mean, she just goes at it, and it's so empowering to me, because I'm like, if more adults would let their guard down and actually do that, they would benefit greatly from it.
That's a really good point. Yeah, definitely send me that link. I'll put that in the show notes. And it's interesting because I do, I say to my boys, I love you a lot, and they say it back. And, I just went through an amicable divorce this year. But growing up in New Hampshire, I never heard the words I love you. I always felt loved. It was never a question about that. But I know that with, my two boys going through this sort of transition, sort of that affirmation of I love you and their I love you back, I mean, that helps. And I noticed that. I mean, I think they're, they have sort of adapted to this pretty well.
No, I couldn't agree more. And it was interesting last night. I was listening to Gary Vaynerchuk, I think his name is.
Vaynerchuk, yeah.
Yeah, he wrote the book Crush It, and he's one of the big social media guys. And I thought it was very interesting because he talks about the ROI of your mother and how, the impact that his mother had on him growing up, and, what she had told him. And he was like, I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I do know that what she did for me was just so important, and she told me I could do anything. And with me personally, my mom told me all the time growing up, you are so handsome, you can be the president of the United States if you want. And the ironic thing was that I didn't have experiences like that growing up. I couldn't get girls. I didn't think they were attracted to me, because the beliefs of my heart really weren't that good, but she'd sewn that in for so long that once I did start to experience something like that, I was like, oh yeah, my mom told me that I was handsome, so of course girls are going to be attracted to me. And then now doing what I'm doing with my organization, you know, I've had more people tell me that it's impossible. I don't have a sports psychology degree, but, you know, I've got Pepperdine contacting me and asking me to come teach sports psychology there, you know, and stuff like that, that everybody else is saying, no, you need you need your PhD, you need this, you need that. And I'm like, no, you know,
Right.
I can do anything, and I don't need to do things the way that everyone else says that you have to. And I know that that is directly attributable to the fact that my mom used to sow affirmations into my heart, even though she didn't know what they were. She was
Right.
just being a good mother.
Being a good mother, exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting. So we have the positive affirmations. We have the heart's belief, so getting into the subconscious, which actually, it's interesting because part of the study materials, I have this audio companion that I record the study materials, and that is like the most, seems to be the most, it's my favorite product, but it's like the most helpful product because I get emails from people like around the holidays, like, hey, David, I just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. You know, you've become a familiar voice in our house. You know, my husband's getting jealous. And Marco, my friend, sent me an email saying, you know, he listened to it while he was on his trip in South America. And so listening to it on a commute, wherever you listen to. So I think some of this material gets into your subconscious,
Yeah,
which is what you need for exam day, because you need to pull out this material and figure out how to use it too, you know?
completely agree with you.
Okay, so we have positive affirmations. We have a heart beliefs. What would be another thing, or what would be something you would say as you get closer to the exam date? Because I know some people will try and just study right up to the moment they walk in the room. And I always tell people, you know, take a week away or whatever, and just sort of go over what you already know, rather than trying to learn information, or new information. So what would you say to people in sort of their final preparations before the exam?
For me, I think that some of the most important things would be not necessarily generic test taking, ideas, or again, I would completely defer to you in that area. But what I would say are that, you know, your affirmations are going to be even more important in those times. But doing other simple techniques like diaphragmatic breathing, you know, a lot of times we don't realize whenever we get stressed out, our breathing starts to be impacted. We start breathing shallowly. And whenever we breathe like that, the oxygen is not getting to our brains effectively, and it makes it harder for us to think. So, you know, taking a couple minutes every day and just, you know, and taking some deep breaths and really oxygenating our blood, and, you know, breaking the whatever pattern that we're in and stopping that and just saying, no, I'm going to get, you know, some good oxygen in my blood and up to my brain, and that's going to help. Some other quick things are, you know, like Tony Robbins, what he teaches is how you change your state immediately is your physiology. Your physiology is the most important, but then from there is what you focus on. You know, if you focus on the bigness of this test and how overwhelming it is, then it's going to feel bigger. You're going to make it bigger in your mind.
Right.
And then the last thing would be the language that you actually use. And so rather than saying something like that this test is overwhelming, or I am, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do this. You know, whenever you use language like that,
Right.
you're making the problem bigger.
Right.
But if you would just literally just change the vocabulary, what he calls is transformational vocabulary, rather than saying I'm overwhelmed, you know, I'm underwhelmed right now. And literally just changing the words that you use, because the words that we use actually describe pictures in our mind. We actually picture things, and then that impacts our subconscious. That's why people say, don't talk about that while I'm eating. It's not that what they're talking about has any, you know, inherent disgusting value. It's what you picture whenever they talk about, and then those pictures get implanted into your subconscious, and that's what makes you lose your appetite. So
Right.
we do it to ourselves all the time by having these negative thoughts and, you know, describing with our words such negative things that then just become pictures in our mind, and it's just this big destructive cycle.
Yeah, we are our own worst enemy,
Yes.
or we can be. We
Yeah.
can, and I'm good. I'm glad to hear you talk about sort of the breathing and I guess being careful of the language that you use. Let's say in that last week, which actually all relates to how you started off at the beginning, whether it was 2 months ago or 3 months ago, whenever you started. If you started building your foundation of the positive affirmation and working on your heart's belief, that's really going to help you in that final week. If you
Definitely.
if you haven't done that mental training, then it's going to creep up at the least opportune time that final week, and then all of a sudden you might have felt like, oh, I'm okay all through it, and then the week before, like, oh my God, I'm going to fail this exam, and then you just panic that week.
Yeah, I think one thing, and I referred this client to you, or not referred him, but I talked about him whenever we were talking, and he was taking a big risk management test, and his full-time job was studying, and he, it was his third one, and he was really nervous, and he really had a ton of anxiety that he would get before these tests. And I just started working with it. I only had one session with him for 2 hours, and he started doing affirmations. He recorded them. He started, trying to be conscious of his self-talk and making sure that it was positive and stopping it when it was negative. And he said that the results that he experienced in that last week were just absolutely incredible, in that for the first time he was able to not cram. He actually slept in and woke up refreshed and feeling confident, and then he believed that he did great on the test. And so if you've done the preparation cognitively, if you've stored all that information inside of you, if you've actually prepared well, then doing the mental training in the last minute can actually put you in a better state. And once you get in that positive state, you're more likely to recall things and perform better as well. So the crazy part about mental training is that we've done so little of it that when we do start to do it, it can have really quick results in our life.
That's another good point. And the mental training, because it's like you're saying, you get, let's say your exam day, and that's when you need things to click. Like when you're sitting in front of the computer and you see a question that you don't really understand, because we know in this particular exam there's a lot of convoluted questions. You don't understand it, and it's like, I don't understand it. So I can either freak out that I don't understand it, or I can say, okay, let me take a breath. Let me read it. I can read, let me read, let me try and digest. Let me just think about it for a second. And that can only happen if you're really prepared, I think. And from what I've seen from candidates, that, the ones that can sort of, not on the fly, but, well, I guess kind of on the fly, like really handle those harder questions, are the ones that are really prepared, because you stay out of your head. Yeah.
And the more that you focus on staying in the moment, that's one of the biggest things that, pressure is a myth. There's no such thing as pressure. Pressure only comes from whenever we think about past failures or future mistakes. Whenever we're staying right in the moment, there's really no pressure. And, for me on the soccer field, what I realized was that the affirmations in my self-talk was horrible. And it didn't make any sense, because it was the sport that I was the best at, but I was the least clutch in that sport. Every other sport I was really clutch. And so I finally, after learning this stuff from Greg Dale, I was like, what am I doing differently on the basketball court than on the soccer field? Well, on the basketball court, I wanted the ball. I knew that I was going to come through. I knew that it was going to happen. And so the language that I was using was very different. It was, give me the ball, I want this. On the soccer field, it was like, I don't want this.
Right.
Even though I was a great soccer player, I was playing on the #1 team in the country. But I just, my self-talk was so poor. So what I started doing is I started saying, the next opportunity I get, I'm going to create a goal. The next opportunity I get, I'm going to create a goal. And especially whenever I would make a mistake, that would be the first thing that I would start saying to myself, is the next opportunity I get. So I started shifting my focus to what was coming up next, and being, staying in that present moment, because we've all seen somebody who makes one mistake, and then that one mistake becomes the rest of their life,
right,
or the rest of their year, or the rest of their week, and they miss all sorts of opportunities because they're focused on that last mistake. You got to be able to let that go. So what I would, say for a test like this is, once a tough question like that comes, let it go and move on to the next one. Because if you're still trying to figure that last question out,
right,
then it's gonna impede you going forward. And I know this has been a long statement for me, but let me keep going because I wrote down some notes for when you have a busy schedule.
Okay.
One thing that I think that you can do to greatly help you out in that sense is make sure that you are completely focused on what you're doing. So if you have a family, make sure that you've sat down with your family and you've said, okay guys, is this something that you want me to do? Here are the benefits that are going to come from me taking this test. Here are the negative things that are going to come from it. There's going to be 2 months where I'm going to need less time, I'm going to have less time with you guys and I'm going to need more time to study. Now, are we in this together? Are we on the same team here? Are we on the same page? And explain things to them in that way. Get them on the same page. And maybe if they're not on the same page, you've really got to question, why you're doing this. Because most people would say they're doing it for their family, but if their family doesn't agree with them,
right,
then all it's going to do is create turmoil and it's not going to be good. So then from there, it's be all in. And what I mean by that is whenever you commit your time to be with your family, be with your family. Be completely emotionally invested and present with them. Leave the other stuff behind. And then whenever you go and you're working on studying, be fully present there and let them know that, this is your time to study and you've got to focus here. And that way they'll feel fulfilled and like their needs are being met, and you will have much more productive study sessions.
And it is too. It's about setting up expectations. And I think if we have expectations and we're communicating, it is easier for that. And it is important that if I'm going to really focus on this, studying for this exam for the next 2 hours, I'm in the spare bedroom or wherever I am. My phone's not in there. I'm not checking email. I'm just studying.
Yeah. That's called, getting in the flow. And we talk about flow very loosely, but there's somebody, I can't remember his name. His name is crazy. I think he's got a Russian descent or something. And I mean, his name is like 50 letters on his last name. And,
right.
But he talks about flow. And if you Google it, you'll be able to find it. And they did a really interesting study where they had people purposefully stop themselves every time they started to get in flow. And they had to stop the study after 2 days because people started to exhibit symptoms of clinical depression. So getting in that state of flow is so, so important. And by communicating to your family, setting up expectations like you talked about, and making sure that you are focused on where you're going and the importance of that and what it means to you, then it's just going to make things so much easier, and it's going to be more healthy for you, obviously, if we're getting in that flow state.
And I would imagine by doing that too, you're going to be more excited about the process because it's not going to be now this daunting task. It's like,
right,
I'm going to tame this beast. I'm going to carve out the time. I'm going to dedicate it. And now you're already setting yourself up for that positive sort of mental state. Right.
Yes. The only thing I would say is be careful with that tame this beast, because if you look at it like a beast,
right,
then your subconscious is going to feel like you're dealing with a beast. But
right,
along these same lines, on Tuesday night, I actually spoke to the business fraternity at Loyola Marymount, and I asked them a question, and I found their response to it very interesting. There were about 30 kids there, and I asked them, how many of you really feel like you're thriving in school? How many of you are passionate about what you do, and you love being here? You really feel like you're thriving. One girl raised her hand, and the interesting part about it was her background. She's from Nigeria. And her goal, the reason why she's here, is to create change in the educational system back in Nigeria. And so to me, for her, studying and what she's focusing on and the language that she's using to describe her experience at school, this is the opportunity of a lifetime for her. Right. That what she is doing is going to make massive impact on the world and on her, homeland. And the rest of them are looking at school as this stepping stone, or just something where they're not thriving because somehow their focus is off, or the language that they're using to describe it, they're not getting the same feelings based off of whatever it is that they're focusing on. She obviously views what she's doing as extremely important and greatly beneficial to her and society, and because of that, I believe that's why she feels like she's thriving. So studying to her, going to class is, this privilege.
Right.
It's not, it's not something that she's entitled to. And I think that whenever we start to shift, how we feel about something and the language that we use to describe it, all of a sudden it can greatly impact our passion.
Yeah, and I think we get more out of it, and we become better students of whatever that is, because we just become now sponges.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I spend 12 to 16 hours a day pursuing my passion. I don't drink coffee. I don't do any, you know, caffeine, artificial stimulants. Nobody is, you know, looking over my shoulder. But I am passionate about what I'm doing, and because of that, there's, you know, I'm able to just go and do, and I don't need anything else to fuel me because I'm passionate about what I'm doing, and I'm not afraid of failing either.
Right.
You know, that I've been to the bottom. I went to the Dream Center and did a volunteer internship there and lived with 2 other people in a 8x8, and then I moved into the closet of a gym to, you know, start my organization. And I've experienced rock bottom, and like you said, you know, when you talk to your clients, that failure isn't always, you know, it's not always a bad thing, and it's not the end of the world.
Right.
And so, based off of, you know, knowing that failure isn't going to hurt you, and that what's the worst thing that can happen,
Right.
you can only go up from there. I don't know if you know J.K. Rowling's story, the lady who wrote Harry Potter. She talks about how being on welfare, and, you know, that she had hit rock bottom, and because she wasn't afraid of failure anymore, that's what enabled her to go full force into the project of writing. All she had was a typewriter and, you know, her little girl that loved her, and she knew that her world hadn't fallen apart, that
Right.
she was still alive, and, you know, she was still ticking, and she was still fully functioning. And so based off of that relinquishment of fear, she was able to, you know, go from being on welfare to being a billionaire in a period of, I think, 7 years.
Yeah. Very cool. And let me ask you this. If people want to contact you first, the best way to contact you, can you do like Skype sessions and all that stuff as well? Yeah, perfect. And how should people contact you?
The best way to contact me would just be to email me, or, I mean, I don't even mind giving out my cell phone number. I always laugh when people are afraid to do that. I have an a reject button, you know, I can always ignore phone calls. So we can put all that up. It's joshua.medcalf@gmail.com. My cell phone's 918-361-8611, and I try and be very expedient in getting back to people, and, you know, I take other people's lives seriously, and, you know, my goal through my organization is to change the world, and I passionately pursue that every day.
And where's 918 area code from?
It's Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's never going to change. And I'm not even the biggest fan of Tulsa, Oklahoma, but I've had that number since I was 16 when I first got one of those big cell phones.
Right.
And I hope that I never have to change it.
Let's cue up. There we go. A little outro music. This was very cool. I'm going to put some stuff in the show notes. Actually, email me your email and your cell phone. I know you just said it, but I'll put it in the show notes here. And then, yeah, this was great. I think this is, hopefully, you listening to this, the candidates listening to this, got a lot out of this, because I think it's really going to, it's going to help them. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right, that is going to do it for today. My name is David Doucette. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. Oop.